Chapter 6. Olivia. A surge of terror ran through my core as I stood face to face with Zephyr. Looking into his eyes, I couldn't help but feel a wave of sexual tension run through me. Reaching out his hand, he introduced himself to me. As our flesh touched, I bit my tongue. As the evening progressed, I became more comfortable with him. I started to read his cues, getting a feel as to how to talk and manipulate him. For years, I have been manipulating men for my own nefarious endeavors. In truth, it has never been on this scale before, but when you flash some cleavage, blink your eyes, and laugh at jokes, you can typically find an in with any man. "How about a drink?" I asked, trying to get something into his hands. My stomach dropped to my feet as he said he wasn't going to drink the swill they were serving at this event. "Fuck!" The screams ran through my head. Then he gave me an in that I couldn't refuse, but also couldn't capitalize on without help. "I have the good stuff back at my place," he stated. With that, I knew I had to adjust the plan. I also needed to tell Davis, so he could follow close behind and save my ass if things go south. Scanning the room, I try to find where he's at. "Are you looking for someone?" he asked. Thinking swiftly, I came up with a lie. "He bought it!" "Going back to your place sounds like a great idea," I said, hoping he will take the bait. "Great." Reaching into his pocket, he called his driver. As he made arrangements, I needed to get away for a minute to cement my plan. "Tell him 10 minutes. "I need to freshen up before we leave," I said. "Make it 10, he replies before hanging up his phone. Taking the opportunity to make my move, I headed towards the bathroom. Once there, I quickly ducked inside and called Davis. "Jesus fuck, this guy doesn't want to drink and now I'm going to his place. I need you to follow close, wait outside, and monitor what is going on. I'm going to see if I can get his ass drunk and slip in this shit. Once he's asleep, I will need to ask fast to get what you need. Any ideas on where to look first?" "Calm down. I'll follow you to his place and use my GPS to find you. Don't stress. Act natural." "This is going to end up better than we hoped," he said, calming my nerves. "Well, don't fuck up." "I don't want to have to fuck this guy." "Well, maybe I do, but not on the job." "Make it quick. Every minute I'm away is another that could go south." Hanging up the phone, I walk over to the mirror and gaze in. The stress in my face is starting to show, and I knew I needed to calm down if this scam was going to work. Doing a final check of my purse, I ensured that I had everything I needed before exiting the bathroom and heading outside. As I stepped outside, the car had arrived, and Zephyr was standing waiting for me. "Shall we?" he said in his sexiest voice. Taking a final look around, I could see Davis exiting the event and standing near the doorway. As I climbed into the car, I took a quick glance and saw that he was heading for his car. My stomach, tied in knots, is about to be tested. As the car drove through the city, I couldn't help but feel more nervous than I had ever been in my life. Clenching onto my purse, I could feel my fingers digging into the leather. Zephyr, who was unaware of what was about to happen, seemed calm, cool, and collected sitting in the seat beside me. "How far is your place from here?" I asked, trying to get my bearings. "Not too far." "About 10 minutes. "Why? Are you uncomfortable?" he asked. "No, of course not. I was just curious as to where you lived. It's a big city with a lot of interesting sights. Just curious as to what your tastes were in regard to the city," I said, trying to make small talk. "Oh, well, you can see the entire city from my place. I have a large terrace that overlooks the eastern portion of the city. You can see all the business district and all the way to the water. On cloudy days, it looks really cool. A large cloud hangs over the city, blocking the streets below. The taller buildings are then illuminated by the moon, making it look like Gotham from Batman or another comic book." He smiled, putting me at ease. "Sounds intriguing." "I can't wait to see it." "So, tell me, what have you been working on lately?" I bet is some exciting high-tech, ultra-secret program sanctioned by the government, I said, trying to make it appear I was interested in his work. Perhaps he would let something slip, or better yet, show me something I could use against him. As I finished my statement, I was given my wish. I developed different types of software and applications for businesses. Currently, I'm working on AI software that will allow businesses to work more productively and streamline their processes and profits. I'm going to be doing a major update to the software tomorrow. I have some code with me I need to review, but once it is implemented will push me that much closer to launch, he said, tapping his briefcase and trying to brag without bragging. Wow, that is when computers take over the world and enslave humanity, right? Oh no? Artificial intelligence is going to take my job? I saw Terminator. I hope you're not creating Skynet, I say, playing the coy dumb blonde. He looked at me with a grin, as I could tell he took my comment as amusing. I knew these rich tech types. They spent the majority of their time in their parents' basement playing Dungeons and Dragons, staring at hours of source code. The first time they actually had a woman talk to them, came in their pants and ran away. The secret to getting what I wanted was simple. Just keep him talking about whatever he wanted to talk about. Eventually, he would forget about who was even in the room. If his mind was focused on him, I had him wrapped around my finger. Oh no, that is all fantasy. People always jump to the wrong conclusion or build up the worst-case scenarios in their mind. Oh no, these robots will create all this art and I will be selling chalk on the streets. Letting out a gut laugh, he then turned to me and smiled. It would be interesting to see a storm from the other side. I smiled. Listen, AI is just a tool. Just like computers replace typewriters, we are simply finding better and more efficient ways to streamline the more tedious tasks. I mean, the backhoe didn't stop people from buying shovels, did it? It is just a matter of adjustment and changing the way you think. Once people are accustomed to these tools and know what they can do, then things will become normalized. The trick is to get in early and stake a claim. He sat back and smiled, totally enthralled by what he was saying. I had him right where I wanted him. His prattling continued for a few more minutes when we arrived at his home. From the street, the building stretched all the way up into the clouds. When he said you could see the city from your place, you weren't kidding, were you? I spoke. Nope. Just wait till you see it from the 75th floor, he said, the two of us getting out of the car and standing on the street. 75th floor, wow. How many floors are there? My heart dropped at the thought of being so high in the sky. Reaching out, he hit W75, which I could only imagine meant West Wing floor 75. On top of that, I had a long way to go to get down and out if something went wrong. Unless he caught me and threw me from the balcony. If that happened, I'm sure nothing would happen to him, and my story would end with a horse splattered on the sidewalk. 90, I think. I really don't recall. I don't spend a lot of time here during the week. I'm usually at the office or out of town in meetings. Come on, I think it is about to rain. Looking up, I could see that the clouds were starting to move in. Good thing we'll be above the clouds. As we stepped into the lobby, we were greeted by a doorman. Good evening, the man said, tipping his hat. The floors were made of white speckled marble. To the right was a large door that said mail room, and down the hall was a sign that said exercise facilities. Making our way to the far wall, we got to a bank of 4 elevators, one for each wing of the building. As we approached, Zephyr pushed the button on bank number 2, signaling that he was on the west wing of the building. After a moment, the whizzing sound of the elevator came to a halt from behind the doors. A moment later, the doors slid open, revealing a large elevator car. I hope you aren't frightened of speed and heights, he stated. As we stood in the elevator, the doors slid shut. Thank you. Your ride will commence in 5 seconds. Please hold on, as our initial movements may be jarring. The voice was female and seemed to be more human than robotic. It reminded me of the computer voice on Star Trek: The Next Generation. God, now I was getting geeky. A moment later, the elevator shuddered and started to move upwards. As it passed the 5th floor, the speed increased to what I could only imagine was 30 miles an hour. Trying to keep my footing, I stumbled into Zephyr's arms. As he held me close, he grinned devilishly as if he knew I was going to fall into him. His eyes gazed down at me, and his hand slid across my breast, accidentally on purpose, getting a free feel. Brushing it off, I smiled and said, "Wow, I didn't expect that." The trip to the 75th floor soon came to an end, and just as it started, the elevator came to a stop with a shudder. Before the doors opened, the voice of the elevator came alive again. "Thank you for traveling with us. Have yourself a good evening. Watch your step getting out of the elevator." As the doors opened, Zephyr motioned for me to step out first. Looking out into the hallway, I could see we were again in a large lobby area with 3 rows of halls spanning out towards apartments. Zephyr stepped out a moment later and started to turn down to the left. I quickly followed, fighting the urge to abort the plan and run away. I mean, if something did go wrong, Davis would have no idea where I was or how to rescue me. I just wanted to get this over with as quickly as possible and get the fuck out. We walked down the hall and reached his door. Taking out a key, he unlocks the door and pushes the door open. Stepping aside, he mumbles, "Home sweet home." Glancing into the doorway, I could see that his apartment was one large room, like a loft. Taking a step inside, I started to move down a small entryway and enter into a spacious living space. To the left was his kitchen and dining area. The rest of the room was a huge community space with couches, chairs, and a flat-screen television on the wall. A large glass wall led out to a terrace that seemed to span the length of the room. To the right appeared to be the bedroom. "So what do you think?" he questioned as the door closed behind me. "I know it's not much, but it is mine," he said again, trying not to sound rich while being ultra-rich. "Not too bad. Not quite up to the standards I'm accustomed to, but if it's all you could afford, it's all you could afford," I said tongue-in-cheek. If he was going to brag without bragging about his wealth, then I was going to play the same game. "Now, impress me," I thought. Zephyr let out a huff and tossed his jacket over a chair by the kitchen. "Well, if this doesn't impress you, then a glass of my finest might do the trick. I know it will impress you more than that swill they were serving earlier." Turning to the kitchen area, he slid to the side and started to pull out a few bottles of assorted alcohol. My expression widened as I started to see exactly what I had been waiting for. Zephyr had pulled out several bottles of different liquors. Turning, he walked into the kitchen and grabbed an assortment of different glasses and returned. "Let's see. What shall we start with?" he mumbled under his breath. As he started to decide on where to start, I was trying to come up with the perfect plan to spike his drink and take a look in that briefcase he was holding in the car. That was going to be my best bet for finding what I needed quickly. If he didn't have what I needed inside, then I had no other place to even start looking. Didn't look like this guy did much work from home. Pulling the top of a tall, slender bottle of booze, he poured 2 fingers' worth into 2 glasses and handed one to me. Raising his glass, he looked at me and made a toast. "To a fun and adventurous evening." I looked at him and smiled. "You have no idea," I thought as we clinked the glasses together and took a sip. The evening continued for about 20 minutes before we made our way out onto the terrace. The air was brisk, and the gloom of the approaching storm gave a strange electrical sensation to the air. On the terrace, he had a few lounge chairs, a small round table with a few padded chairs. Making my way to the edge of the terrace, a large cement wall extended about 5 feet off the ground. It was tall enough to prevent someone from accidentally falling over, and even better yet, more difficult to toss someone over the edge. Taking a sip of my drink, I started to look out over the city. The flashing lights and the movement of the cars below gave you an amazing perspective of the city and life itself. As I stood there admiring the city, Zephyr came up from behind me, placed his hand on the small of my back, and spoke. "An amazing view, isn't it?" he asked, taking a sip of his drink. "It is amazing. I never thought I would see the city from these heights." Gazing off into the distance, an airplane started to make its final approach into the city. Looking at it intently, I couldn't help but shake in my own thoughts in my ability to almost reach out and touch the plane. Steadying the drink in my hand, I also felt humbled as to see inside some of the windows as the plane flew by. Taking a final look, I turned and headed towards one of the lounge chairs. Laying in the chair, I put my feet up and closed my eyes. A moment later, I could hear Zephyr sit in the chair behind me. "This is the life, isn't it?" I questioned. "Yeah, you can get used to it. I like the beach and water myself. However, I can't sell AI software to beach bums and families on vacation. If I could, I would be there in an instant. As it is, I hang out here in the clouds, away from the world. I guess it's just as relaxing," he said, taking the final sip of his drink. "Yeah, it is a way to escape from the world, either way. The best part is that it is so quiet I could get lost in my own thoughts living up here," I said. Sitting up, Zephyr said, "Well, time for another drink." As he stood, I saw this as my opportunity to make my move. If I were to drink any more, I don't know if I would remember why I was there or what I was supposed to do. You have been playing bartender all night. Besides, who knows when I will have the chance to pour a $500 bottle of liquor again in my life? It will be a story I can tell the common folk tomorrow. Getting to my feet, I reached out my hand, waiting for Zephyr to hand me his glass. "Who am I to deprive you of such a glorious once-in-a-lifetime event?" He smiled, handing me his glass. As the glass touched my fingertips, I knew that I had to make my move without him seeing. My body began to tense up, and my nerves were on fire. Once I had the glass in my hand, I let out an inaudible sigh and headed into the apartment. With each footstep, I could feel his eyes burning their way into the back of my skull. As I passed the couch and saw the kitchen was in my grasp, I glanced out the window and saw he was laying down, looking away from my actions. Taking his glass, I placed it on the counter and began to dig through my bag. As my hands shook and the items scattered about, I knew my time was ticking by more rapidly than I could spare. Then I spotted it. Grasping the vial in my hand, I twisted the lid, dumped the contents into his glass, and quickly threw the vial back into my purse without a second thought. A moment later, I grasped for the bottle of liquor and slowly poured his drink, then mine. As the brown liquid filled his glass, I could see the drug combined into one, concealing the evidence I had done anything. Pouring myself another glass, I made sure that I could distinguish between the two, corked the bottle, and grasped both glasses in my hands. "Here goes everything," I mumbled under my breath. There was no turning back now. As I stepped outside, the bitterness of the evening air seemed to have intensified over the last few minutes. As I advanced towards Zephyr to hand him his drink, he sat up and made a statement that rocked me to the core. "It is getting too cold out here. Let's go inside." As he sat up and eyed the drink, he started to reach for the one that was spiked. He grasped it from my hand and took a sip. "Good. I might have to hire you as a bartender for my next social mixer," he said, getting to his feet. I smiled at his comment and took a step back. Taking a few steps forward, he extended his arm and stated, "After you." Entering into the apartment, I knew my time was at an end. I needed to have that drink take effect soon, or I may be forced to sleep with him. As the door to the balcony closed, I could feel him walk close to me, placing his hand on my hip and gently kissing my neck. The sensation of his lips on my neck sent shivers down my spine. Closing my eyes, I started to picture something else. Then I felt both of his hands caress my shoulders, start to make their way down my arms till they reached my elbows. Another kiss caressed my neck, and I could feel his manhood as it pressed against my ass through his clothing. "What do you think about taking this party a little further? I can put on some music, and we can come and sit on the couch." His words sent shivers down my spine. Knowing I had a role to play, I smiled, turned my head towards my shoulder, and smiled. "I can go freshen up in the bathroom, and when I come out, we can see what happens." Raising my hand up, I took my nail and dragged it down the front of his chest. Gazing up at him, I moved in closer, as if I were going to kiss him, but quickly pulled away. "Finish your drink, and I will be right back." Taking a sip of my drink, I wrap both hands around my glass, take a step back, smile, and head towards the bathroom. After reaching the bathroom, I closed and locked the door. Placing my purse on the sink, I frantically started digging through its contents for my phone. After dumping the contents out, I found it, quickly turned it on, and called Davis. "Is it done?" he said, anticipation in his voice. "Not yet. I just slipped in the drink and am waiting for it to take effect. Should be about 6 or 7 minutes. I'm getting ready to grab the drive and do what I need to do. Make sure you are in the area so I can get the hell out of here. I'm on the 75th floor, for God's sake." I kept my voice quiet as not to alarm Zephyr of my actions. "Don't worry, I'm downstairs in the garden area. Just call me when you are heading down, and I'll meet you out front. You can be in the car and halfway home in 30 seconds once you reach the door. Don't fuck up, and good luck." And with that, he hung up the phone. "Asshole," I said as I started to put the contents of my purse back where they belonged. On top, I left the device and my phone. Gazing up into the large mirror, I knew that there was no turning back. Collecting my nerves, I put on the best smile I could and headed out into the living room. There on the couch was Zephyr. He had removed his shirt and was sitting comfortably with his drink in his hand. To my delight, I could see that the contents of the glass were almost totally consumed. Making my way to a nearby wall, I leaned up against it and struck a sexy pose. "So, what did you have in mind, big boy?" I stated, my mind racing in a million different directions. A large grin came across his face as he raised his hand, extended his index finger, and bent it back and forth as if signaling me to move forward. Taking a step forward, I began to move slowly, seductively towards him. Running my fingers up and down the sides of the straps of my dress, I paused, pretending to pull the straps to the side before returning them. "Come here, sit on Daddy's lap." Zephyr took the now empty glass of liquor and placed it on the table beside him. As I moved closer, I could see that his eyes were starting to get red and heavy. The drug was starting to take effect. As I started to move towards him, I could tell he would be out like a light in no more than 5 minutes. Making it to the front of the couch, I leaned in, placing both hands on his legs. Sliding my body forward, I made sure that he had a clear view of my breasts through the top of my dress. Leaning in, I give him a peck on the lips, a whisper of air, our flesh barely touching. Gazing up, I could see that he was no longer coherent. I simply needed a few more minutes for him to pass out. Running my nail down the front of his chest, I could see him smile with an intoxicated grin. "Are you ready for me to drive you wild?" I said, moving closer, straddling him, pressing my chest against his. Sitting there silent and motionless, I soon heard him snoring. That was my cue. Getting off him, I started to look around the room for his briefcase. Glancing over to the kitchen area, I saw it hidden under the coat that he had placed on the chair a few hours earlier. Grabbing the briefcase, I flung it into the air and placed it on the counter. Holding my breath that he hadn't locked it, I pushed the button. A click came alive, and the case popped open. "Thank God for small favors," I cry out, looking into the case. As I started to dig through some papers, I discovered the thumb drive that he said had the new updated code for his AI system on it. Snatching it up, I grabbed the device out of my bag and placed it on the table. In the device was a memory card with data on it. The end user would insert this card and then connect multiple thumb drives or external hard drives to the USB ports of the device. When all the devices were attached, you simply hit a button. Once the light turned green, you knew that the data from the memory card was installed on all the connected devices. As I slipped in the drive, I hit the button. A moment later, the device came alive and started transferring data to the thumb drive. The data that it was transferring was a computer virus along with some ransomware. The idea was that once the drive was accessed or sent into the system, the virus and ransomware would be installed as code. The virus would give anyone backdoor access to your computer. They could spy on every keystroke that you made and allowed you to access software, websites, or whatever could be accessed without anyone knowing. Then, once we had the information that we wanted, we could access the ransomware and lock down the computer or prevent access for specific people. This is where we would hold Zephyr and the company hostage for whatever we wanted them to pay. After a few seconds, the red light turned green. Letting out a deep sigh of relief, I pulled the thumb drive from the device and tossed it back into the briefcase, closing it tight. Carefully, I returned it to the chair and placed his coat on top of it, as if it hadn't been touched. Gathering up the device, I placed it in my purse and grabbed my phone. Pulling up Davis's number, I sent him a text. Done. Taking a quick look around the apartment, Zephyr was still passed out on the couch. Sorry, dude. You are nice and all, but money is money. Picking up my purse and grabbing a few bottles of liquor, I darted to the front door, opened it, and stepped outside into the hall. As the door closed, it locked behind me. Making my way down the hall, I made it to the bank of elevators. Pushing the button, it took more than a minute for the car to reach the 75th floor. With each passing second, my heart beat harder and faster in my chest. As the car reached the floor, I glanced over my shoulder and down the hall, making sure that no one saw me, or even more importantly, Zephyr wasn't following me. Stepping into the elevator, my finger rapidly pressed the lobby button. A second later, the voice of the elevator came alive, and I started to move. 75, 70, 65, 40, the numbers started to count down rapidly. Pressing my body against the far wall of the elevator, I counted the seconds to freedom. When the elevator reached the bottom floor and the voice wished me a good evening, I darted out of the car and across the lobby. When I reached the door, I pushed it open and darted towards Davis's car. As I dove inside, I couldn't breathe. Placing the bottles of liquor on the floor of his car, the only words I could muster were, "Drive. Fucking drive." A moment later, the car sped through the parking lot and onto the street. After traveling 5 blocks, I let out a deep gasp of air. I was safe. It was a success.